Anyway, I'm so happy to be here with Joseph Carr. So Joseph started selling the very first bottles of Josh Cellars Cabernet out of his truck. I feel like it's important to say it was a beat-up truck, right? Back in 2008, he did not come from a family of sommeliers. Quite the contrary. Joe's background, blue-collar background, and his dad, and we're going to get to that, is really became the brand's secret sauce. So I guess we have to say by knocking wine off its lofty perch, making it accessible, affordable, and even fun, today, Josh Cellars is now the #1 selling table wine brand in the U.S. So, yes.
Thank you.
What's also interesting, it's earned a really coveted following among young consumers, which is a big deal in the wine category. His story, the growth story of the brand, has such important lessons on brand differentiation, on reaching new audiences, and in a crowded market. We're going to dig into all of that today, and we're also leaving room for your questions, so please have those questions. Welcome, Joseph. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. So I wanted to start by taking a short trip down memory lane. I think that your story is really instructive, and so you, like we said, you grew up in a blue-collar town and Joseph corrected me, it's not Berlin, it's Berlin, right? Berlin, New York, and there have been really pivotal details along the way from that small town. And Berlin, to give you a little taste of what that was like, and I'd love this, you said, quote, "We didn't have a vineyard. Everyone's favorite white wine was Budweiser." So there's that. But then there was that pivotal trip before college to Napa Valley, and then you would become a seasoned sommelier, and then a business founder. So I say all that because even though we all don't have the same journeys, other people's journeys are instructive, right? So my question for you was, what are the critical inflection points of that journey that shaped Josh Cellars' sustained growth that all of these businesses can learn from?
Well, first off, after listening to the gentleman talk about taxes, I don't know about you, but I really need a drink. I'm in trouble. You know, I've had a very interesting journey. We're all on a journey. My journey began in a lumber mill town in upstate New York, and my father was a lumberjack. And we grew up pretty humble beginnings. I didn't really think of it that way because everybody was the same as far as I was concerned. But when I graduated from high school, I barely graduated from high school, I hitchhiked to California, and I had long hair. And I put out a sign. And I carried a Kerouac's book On the Road. Oh. And Steinbeck's wonderful book, Travels with Charlie. And I wanted to see America. I had never been outside of my hometown. And I wound up in San Francisco. I had about $10 left to my name. And I stood on the street and juggled tennis balls, and I earned $20, so I knew I could get a bus ticket home. And I wound up going to Napa Valley. Somebody said there was a winery up there. I said, well, I don't know what that is, but I'll go check it out. And I went up there. And in 1978, Napa Valley wasn't like it was today. It was filled with, it had a lot of hippies. It had some people that you'd probably be dismissed as immigrants. They were from Spain and France and Italy, and they were there following the American dream, producing wine and bringing their culture. And I met a family that I went up on the porch, and they gave me a sandwich because they could tell I was starving to death, and they offered me a glass of wine. It was Cabernet Sauvignon, and it was like nothing I'd ever tasted before. It certainly was not Budweiser. And that's really where the love affair began. And I went back to college. My twin sister and I were the first ones in our family to ever go to college. And that was my father's American dream, my mother and father's American dream. They never went to college. They were both very bright. but they couldn't afford to go to school, and they were determined that their kids would go to college. And that embodies my father's American dream.
And the brand is really a love letter to Joseph's dad. I mean, it's named after him. I wanted for you to just share a little bit about what his imprint is on the business's success.
Well, my father worked very hard. You know, he kind of put into us what companies call core values. Every company has a set of core values, and they talk about them, but do they walk? And I learned core values from my father, which was respect the people you work with, and respect yourself and earn the respect of others. Trust, make sure that you are trustworthy and the people that you work with are trustworthy. A blue-collar work ethic. You know, my father worked to survive. It wasn't for success. He was working to survive. And I kind of took that and I applied that to what I did. And the last is family. You know, whatever you do, don't sacrifice what you do, you know, and neglect your family. And those are the core values that I learned from my father, and those are the core values that I maintain today and reflect what Josh Cellars is really all about.
And how many employees are living those core values? You have how many employees now?
Well, our brand is managed by the Deutsch family, and they have over like 200, almost 400 employees, and it's a great culture to be with. But you know, what I didn't touch upon is I became a sommelier in a French restaurant. I had driven a truck. I drove a truck. I worked in a lumber mill. I worked in a greenhouse, but I mostly worked around in the woods. So when I came home, I had to like empty my pockets of sawdust, and the smell of oak is very sour, and I could never kind of get that off my clothing. And when I went to college, I walked by a French restaurant called the Big Tree Inn, and guys in there were wearing tuxedos, serving food and wine. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I am so doing that. Because in 1977, let me tell you something, I looked pretty good in a lime green tuxedo with a green velvet bow tie. So I walk in to the owners and I say, my name's Joseph Carr. I have worked at some of the finest French restaurants in my hometown. The guy's like, I don't think so. So he made me a busboy. I didn't want to be a busboy because the busboys wore vests and the waiters wore tuxedos, and I really wanted the tuxedo. So 2 weeks go by, and the owners come to me and they say, Joseph, you know, we don't know how to tell you this, but you're the worst busboy we ever hired. Because I didn't know. I'd never eaten a French restaurant before. But the owner's wife really liked me. She said, you know, he's always on time. He has manners. I learned manners from my mother with a stick. So I had manners. So the guy gives me a book on wine, a tie bow tie, and an empty bottle of wine. He says, come back on Monday, and I'll give you a job. And I came back. I read the book all weekend. I loved it. It took me to Bordeaux, to Burgundy, to the Loire Valley, to Tuscany. It took me to a lot of places that the son of a lumberjack from a lumber mill town was never going to see. And I came back, and he goes, what are you doing here? I said, well, you said if I read the book, you'd give me a job. He goes, you read that book? I said, yes, I did. He goes, really? He goes, okay, tell me 3 crus of Beaujolais. Trick questions, there's 9. I go, Morgon, Fleuret, Melevin. He's like, God damn it, I got to give you a job. And I became a wine steward, and then later I became a certified sommelier. I came home and I said, Dad, guess what? I'm a sommelier. He said, don't talk like that in front of your mother. And then he said, are you telling me that people pay you to taste wine and talk about it? I go, yeah. This is the...
But it's really a story about falling in love with something and then just absorbing it and learning the business, right? And I wanted to just like fast forward to what, you know, there are a lot of wine brands out there. Not every wine brand is going to become the #1 table wine brand. So you said this, which was so interesting. that roughly 1,000, they'll take this in, 1,000 labels launch and 1,000 disappear every year, which is really, now you guys sell, what is it, 7 million cases annually. What I want to get at, how did you manage to become the #1 brand? And what's the key to differentiating in such a crowded market?
Well, the wine industry is very complex, and it's filled with a lot of big companies, international companies, and marketing agencies that kind of come up with themes and concepts. And the Josh Cellars story and journey is authentic, and it's real. So when you look behind the curtain, you realize there was this family, my wife and myself, who refinanced our house, and I made wine inside somebody else's winery for over 5 years. And I told the story of my dad, this blue-collar guy that instilled these core values in me. And I wanted to make a wine that was approachable, complex, balanced, and a good value. And I really felt that the American consumer needed that. There was this mystique about wine. Yeah. But, you know, if you were to go to Italy or France or Spain, where I traveled, if you could go into the countryside, if you go to have lunch, there's going to be a bottle of wine on the table. It's not some fancy thing. It's part of your culture. And I really felt that Americans were ready for that, and that's why I produced Josh. And Josh was my dad's nickname. That was his name. His name was Joseph. And my mother told me that his nickname was Josh. He was a race car driver. He raced stock cars until my twin sister and I were born, and then my mother informed him that he wasn't going to be doing that anymore. And she said his nickname was Josh. I'm like, I never heard anyone in our house call my father Josh. I never heard that. She goes, that's right. Because anybody that calls your father Josh was not allowed in our house. They were bad boys.
But it was that authentic story behind the brand, you know, demystifying wine, making it accessible. I think the average price point is about $20 for your brand, and it's
Yep.
and it's respected. You know, it's a respected brand as well. So I want to get it to the viral. There's an interesting viral story. The brand went viral in 2024, and which really helped to expand beyond baby boomers to reach millennials and Gen Z, which is no small feat. It's a category that's typically skewed older. You guys over-index, correct me if I'm wrong, with the under 40 crowd, right?
Yes.
So what drove that cultural moment? How did you capitalize on it? And what's the takeaway for this audience?
Well, a couple of things that happen. You know, when you produce wine and it goes out into the world, you don't really know what the experience is. What's the end user? And Facebook came along. And we heard all these wonderful stories about people sharing our wine, whether it was a first date, or maybe it was a wedding, or it was a life well lived. And we would sit around the supper table and listen to these stories, and it was really amazing. And then I did a short commercial about my journey that wound up on YouTube. And I've had 100 million views on YouTube. And someone came out with a meme, and it got 100 million comments in a week. I had to call my daughter and say, what's a meme? I have no idea. But it blew up, and then Saturday Night Live picked it up and put it in 3 sketches. And it's crazy, and the industry is talking about it, and it's a real joy to have this. And I think that's kind of set us apart. And we try to capture younger consumers. The style and the value is something they're open to. So between social media and that, I think that's where we're at.
A quick question about going back to the funding and refinancing your house and
don't do it.
And your 401k, you emptied it out. Is there a quick lesson on you know,
capital is really tough.
Yeah.
You know, small businesses, banks won't give you loans. If you got a rich uncle, great. I didn't have a rich uncle. I sat my wife down and told her what I thought the American dream was. One day I quit my job, and we refinanced our house. You use assets to get money. And I told her, and I asked her if that's something that we could do. And she said to me, you know, you've been in this business since you were 18 years old. If this is the next chapter in your life, We have to do it. We can't not do it. And then we drank 3 bottles of wine. 3 bottles of wine. She goes, yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, do it. So obviously, well, it worked out, right? Expansion. So it's interesting. Now you're expanding into non-alcoholic beverages, which is a very hot category, and even into merch. You have apparel, you have drinkware. I'm curious about what are the consumer trends that you're thinking about? What that's shaping your growth strategy and why?
Well, I mean, consumers today, the alcohol business is down. So we have to be innovative. We have to look to some things. NA Prosecco. We have a beautiful winery in northern Italy where we make Prosecco. You'll have that later. And we also make an NA Prosecco. Part of our social media stance is to create wine cocktails because we're part of a cocktail generation. And we want to be part of that. So that's some of the things we do. You know, and also in a small business, you have to learn how to pivot. You got to be ready to pivot. And I remember one year I was making Merlot. I really love Merlot. From the right bank of Bordeaux, they make some of the most world-class wines. A friend of mine said, well, maybe you should make some Pinot Noir. I'm like, no, Pinot Noir is really hard to make. It's not easy, and I'll screw it up. But the guy convinced me, so I made Pinot Noir. Well, guess what? The movie Sideways came out.
Oh my God, that's right.
I couldn't give away a bottle of Merlot,
Wow.
and I sold all the Pinot Noir. So the next year I changed the name of Merlot to Red Wine Blend, and I sold it all. So you've got to be flexible. You've got to be ready to pivot at any moment in time.
That's right. I forgot about that sideways. Okay, so last question, then we're going to take your questions. Best advice for small businesses, something that you wish you'd known when you were starting out that you can share with them?
Understanding finance was the most difficult thing. I did not have a financial background. I was an art student. So I wound up becoming president of this big wine company, and I immediately went to the library and got the Harvard Business School of Finance so I could understand what accountants were saying, because I didn't know the language. So, and surround yourself with really good people. Listen to what they have to say, respect them. Hopefully they will respect you. You can't know everything. And surround yourself with people that share your vision. If they don't share your vision, as good as they are, they probably have to go away. And that's kind of the hard lessons that I had to learn.
That's it's a good note to end on. Questions from the audience? We have over here, Miss Lady over here.
I want to know where the woman in his life is and give her a hand.
Well,
I hope she's here with you.
no, she's not, unfortunately. My wife, Dee, she was the co-founder of the brand. And one day we were having a board meeting in our supper table. And the board consisted of myself, my wife, my daughter, Kaylin, who's in law school, and my dog, Max. Kaylin was not there, but Max was there. We had a quorum so we could take a vote. And Dee said, we should make Chardonnay. And I said, no, I'm a red wine maker. And she said, no, I'm president of the company. And the dog moved over to her. So I made Chardonnay, and a year later, it got the highest rating of any wine I made.
Oh.
And for the rest of the time, I heard,
Wow.
I told you so.
Oh.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you and congratulations. The question I have for you, if there is one thing you would really do over again in your career, what would that be?
Do over in my career. I probably wouldn't do anything differently. One of the things that I want to emphasize before we get too far along is if you look around this room, all of you embody the American dream. And you do it with 4 words that I've kind of inserted here and there. The first word is courage. Have the courage to try something. And conviction is the second word that you have to have. And the third word's kind of strange. It's called energy. If you start your own business, guess what? You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, what am I doing? And Dee would elbow me and say, go back to sleep, I'm going to put a pillow over your head, right? And I go back to sleep, and about 3 minutes later, Dee would go, oh my God, what are we doing? And the last thing is love. You start something that you love to do, and hopefully you do it with someone you love and someone that believes in you. Because if you work with people that believe in you, this is what happens. When you win, they cheer the loudest. When you face adversity, they stand beside you. And when you fail, which you will, they'll be there to pick you up, and then you'll have the will to go on. That's my recipe.
That was amazing. Can I ask a question about what do you consider a failure that you bounced back from?
Well, my biggest customer went bankrupt.
Wow.
I was in debt over $1 million, and that's when that's when the supper table had a lot of tears. Mm-hmm. And I just had to figure out how to fix it. And how I fixed it was I was making wine in Napa Valley under my own name, under Joseph Carr, and Josh came along, and I went and cashed in my 401k, $70,450.25, and it took a year to produce Josh Cellars, and that was the pivotal moment. My wife didn't talk to me for about a week after that, but here we are today. We're America's #1 premium brand, over 7 million cases, and that is an American dream that is amazing.
I have one other question, unless somebody else has a. How do you measure success, and what's important to? How has that changed? What's important to note about measuring success that this audience would benefit from?
Well, whatever you're doing, we always when we launch a new wine, we always say, can we be best in class? So quality, whether it's a product or satisfaction if it's a service, that's what you have to ask yourself every day. Have I achieved that? And you got to be true to yourself. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, that Cabernet didn't come out too well. What are we going to do about it? I never had that problem because I knew a lot about Cabernet Sauvignon. But yeah, you got to do your gut check. You got to self-examine what you're doing and keep going back to that. And be positive. Be positive in everything you do. I mean, nobody wants to hear you complain about, the taxes or this and that. You got to have an answer. You got to have a solution. Some people think, oh, the glass is half empty or half full. Well, my glass is half full, and I want the other half of it to be full, like right now. So that's how I look at it. Yes.
Hi, I want to ask about first a start of the Josh to becoming a Josh Premium Company. What is your governance? How is your governance, company governance is evolving? And as a leader, what did you learn from it?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that. It's such a competitive business. And when I partnered with the Deutsch family, they came in. They're a family-owned company, just like me. And we sat down at the table, and they were talking about the future. And they said something. And I couldn't believe what they said, that they would take it to this place. And I said to myself, well, I'm not the only crazy person in the room, because they are definitely nuts. And they made me a promise, and they kept it. They kept that promise. And we worked together, and that's a big part of the success. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
That was 2011. Was that
2011.
Yeah.
No private equity, no public.
I think that's.
Hi, thank you. Leanne King from Resonant Movement. I have a question about your social and environmental impact initiatives. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to give back to the communities with respect to social change and environmental impact? And what motivates you to do that?
Philanthropy is a word that we didn't use in my hometown because nobody had any money. We had this thing called a bake sale. And raising money for the church or the school band was something that was very important to me. So with our company, we wanted to be involved in communities. One of the things we also wanted to be involved with was first responders. My father and my grandfather were volunteer firemen. We lived across the street from the fire department, and we understood that in our community that you had a responsibility to your neighbors, your family, and your friends. I got very involved in the military with veterans. I'm going to be doing an event with Gary Sinise down in Nashville, who started a foundation to help military veterans. And the reason I did that was when I was 14 years old, I came home and my father was at the supper table, and the American Legion was there, and they asked me if I would play taps for a military funeral since I played the trumpet. So I began playing taps for military funerals from the time I was 14 till the time I was 31 when my dad passed away. And I will continue to blow that trumpet in some way. So that's why we're involved, because it's organic. It's not, hey, let's write a check to something. We want to be part of communities. And I highly encourage you in your town to be part of that community. Maybe you can't write a check, but you can stand alongside them and walk down the road with them. And I think that's vitally important.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
And I met you with your energy, and then like my director or whoever didn't have that level of energy, I would kind of feel a little bit cheated because, as you said, energy is infectious and something that helps drive your organization or organizations, I feel, as well. So how do you pick your leaders? Are you picking based on just strategy and how you can increase volume, or do they have heart and passion like you?
99% of them have that passion. There's always one calm person in the room that's kind of twiddling his thumbs going, oh boy, how do we keep up with this? But the Deutsch family, they have an amazing group of people in both the marketing and sales. And you know, we're talking about wine. I mean, wine, I don't know if you know this, but wine is a lot of fun. And if you're not having fun in the wine business, then you should go do something else. I mean, we work with growers and coopers and marketing people and winemakers who are really quirky, weird, nerdy, drinking people. And you cannot not have fun and energy. And that's how I don't drink any coffee either. I just kind of go at it. Yes? What's that? You just call me. Yeah. No, it's been a fun journey.
I think we have one more question, and then we're going to have some fun with wine soon.
Yes.
So, over this gentleman.
Yes, thank you. My name's Christian with the Catholic Group, and as a family-owned and family-oriented company, do you run into any particular difficulties having relatives in the decision-making process?
Not my relatives. My relatives are lumberjacks. No, so my daughter is a lawyer. She actually left law and works for has her own nonprofit in animal welfare. So she was not going to be the succession plan. The succession plan was the Deutsch family, who I met, and they are now almost 4 generations of planning and taking this to the next level. So no, we haven't had that. It was hard, I will tell you that, to kind of hand the reins over to another family. But the brand and what we set out to do was so important to us that we realized that they were the right partner to take it to the next level. It's you know, it's like giving up your kid, but it worked out great, and now I feel very much like a member of the Deutsch family, and vice versa. So
I lied. One more question. You said, Maureen.
Hello, Mr. Carr. My name is Brandy Robinson. I'm an Air Force veteran who also used to be stationed in northern Italy, and I'm also an avid customer of Josh Wine.
Thank you.
I recently transitioned into full-time as a fine artist, and I own a company called Murray Art Collective. And I would like to just first thank you because having paint and tips with Josh Wine is very enjoyable, especially being a creative. But I have to ask if there's any future possibility that you would offer any opportunities for fine artists to do limited edition covers for any of the wine bottles.
You know, we're always looking at innovation and new label designs. The Josh label design, I used a very famous artist for, and her name was Jean Carr, who was my mom, because I couldn't afford an artist.
That's her.
And that's her handwriting. She practiced calligraphy, and she wrote my father's name on a piece of paper. And for many years, she demanded commission. And I would give her wine. She said, "I need a case of wine." I'm like, "Mom, you don't drink. What are you doing with it?" "I'm giving it to my friends." But yeah, so artists. You know, I have an art background too, so yeah, finding emerging artists and seeing where they come in would be wonderful. Yeah. Good luck. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Please let's shake hands with Joseph.
Thank you very much.